The chill of the Crimean winter seeped into every bone in Tom Carlyle's body as he trudged through the muddy, blood-soaked trenches. The siege of Sevastopol had raged on for months, and the landscape bore the scars of relentless warfare. Cannons thundered in the distance, and the air was thick with smoke, the cries of the wounded, and the stench of death. Tom, a seasoned war correspondent, had seen his share of battlefields, but the scale of destruction here was overwhelming. His eyes, a sharp blue that missed nothing, scanned the chaos before him. Men, reduced to little more than desperate animals, clawed at the earth for cover as shells exploded around them. Tom knew he should be documenting every detail, but a gnawing unease pulled his attention elsewhere. He noticed a small group of soldiers huddled around something in the trenches, their faces pale and tense. Curiosity piqued, he approached. As he drew closer, he saw her. A woman, kneeling beside a soldier whose leg had been blown apart, her hands steady as she worked to stop the bleeding. Her raven-black hair was pinned beneath a white nurse's cap, though a few strands had escaped, framing a face that was both beautiful and hauntingly solemn. Her green eyes were focused, filled with a determination that seemed almost out of place amidst the carnage. Elena Petrovna was no stranger to death. As a nurse in the Russian army, she had seen more than her share of the horrors of war. But even now, as she fought to save the life of yet another wounded soldier, she felt a deep sorrow that threatened to consume her. The war had taken so much, friends, family, even hope. But she carried on, driven by a sense of duty and a fierce compassion that had not yet been extinguished. Tom watched her for a moment, struck by the calm efficiency with which she worked. In this hellish place, she was a beacon of humanity, a small, bright light in the darkness. Without thinking, he stepped forward, offering his help. "Can I do anything?" he asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Elena looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. For a moment, the noise of the battlefield seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of stillness. She hesitated, then nodded, gesturing for him to hold the soldier's arm steady. As they worked together, a strange sense of camaraderie formed between them. They exchanged no words, only glances and nods, but in that brief time, they understood each other in a way that went beyond language. When the soldier was finally stable, Elena sat back, wiping the sweat from her brow. Tom could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll that this war had taken on her. Yet, there was also a resilience there, a strength that made him admire her even more. "Thank you," she said softly, her Russian accent coloring the words. "There are so many, I don't know if I can save them all." "You're doing more than most," Tom replied, his tone gentle. "You're giving them a chance." Elena nodded, though her expression remained troubled. She stood, brushing the dirt from her uniform, and turned to leave. But something stopped her, a question she couldn't suppress. "Why are you here?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "This is not your war." Tom considered her words. It was a question he had asked himself many times. Why was he here, in this foreign land, surrounded by death and destruction? What was he hoping to find? Redemption? A story that would finally make sense of all the senseless violence? He wasn't sure. "I'm here to tell the truth," he said at last. "To show the world what's really happening. And maybe to find something worth holding on to." Elena's eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked as though she might say something more. But then, with a small, sad smile, she simply nodded and turned away, disappearing into the chaos of the battlefield. Days turned into weeks, and the siege dragged on. Tom found himself drawn to Elena, seeking her out whenever he could. It was dangerous, of course. She was Russian, and he was British, enemies in this brutal conflict. But there was something about her, something that made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. They began to steal moments together, small snatches of time amidst the war, where they could talk, share stories, and, for a brief time, forget the world around them. It was during one of these stolen moments that Tom first noticed the strange occurrences. It began with whispers among the soldiers, tales of a ghostly figure that roamed the battlefield at night, a shadow that seemed to vanish into thin air. At first, he dismissed it as superstition, the kind of story soldiers tell to distract themselves from the horrors of war. But then, one night, he saw it for himself. He had been walking back to his tent after meeting Elena, the night air cold and still. As he passed a cluster of tents, he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning, he saw a figure, a man, dressed in the uniform of a Russian officer, standing at the edge of the camp. The man's face was hidden in shadow, but there was something about his posture, the way he stood so still, that sent a chill down Tom's spine. He blinked, and the figure was gone. The encounter left Tom unsettled. He tried to push it from his mind, but the image of that shadowy figure lingered, gnawing at him. He began to ask questions, discreetly at first, trying to piece together what was happening. What he discovered was more disturbing than he had anticipated. There were rumors of a secret, a powerful secret, one that could change the course of the war. It was said that a high-ranking officer had been killed, not in battle, but in cold blood, by someone within his own ranks. The reason? A document, hidden somewhere in Sevastopol, containing information that could shift the balance of power. The officer's ghost, it was said, now haunted the battlefield, searching for the one who had betrayed him. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a story. And when he shared his suspicions with Elena, her reaction only confirmed his fears. She paled, her hands trembling slightly as she listened to him speak. "There's something I need to tell you," she said quietly, after a long silence. "Something I should have told you before." Elena led him to a small, hidden chapel on the outskirts of the city, a place she said had once been a sanctuary for those seeking refuge. Inside, she revealed the truth. Her brother, a Russian officer, had been the one killed. He had stumbled upon the secret by accident, and in his final moments, he had entrusted the document to Elena, begging her to keep it safe. "I didn't know what to do," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, but I also couldn't destroy it. I thought if I hid it here, it would be safe." Tom listened in silence, his heart heavy with the weight of her confession. He realized now that the connection he had felt with Elena was more than just a fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, born of shared pain and a desire for something more than the brutal world they lived in. He knew that they could not stay in Sevastopol, not with the secret they now shared. The city was no longer safe for either of them. "We have to leave," Tom said, his voice firm. "We'll take the document and go somewhere far away, where no one can find us." Elena looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and hope. "But where? They'll hunt us down." "Let them try," Tom replied, taking her hands in his. "We'll be together, and that's all that matters." The decision was made. That night, under the cover of darkness, they made their escape. The journey was perilous, fraught with danger at every turn, but they were driven by the need to protect the secret that had cost so many lives. They traveled across the frozen Russian landscape, always looking over their shoulders, knowing that they were being pursued. As they reached the border, with freedom in sight, they were confronted by the man who had started it all, the traitor who had killed Elena's brother. He stood before them, a gun in his hand, his eyes cold and calculating. "It's over," he sneered. "Give me the document, and I might let you live." Tom and Elena exchanged a glance, and in that moment, they knew what they had to do. With a sudden, desperate burst of energy, Tom lunged at the man, knocking the gun from his hand. A struggle ensued, fierce and chaotic, but in the end, it was Elena who delivered the final blow, her hand steady as she struck the traitor down. Breathing heavily, Tom and Elena looked at each other, the weight of what they had just done settling over them. But there was no time for regrets. Together, they crossed the border, leaving behind the bloodshed and betrayal of Sevastopol. They settled in a small village, far from the reach of war, where they could start a new life. The document, with all its dangerous secrets, was destroyed, and they vowed never to speak of it again. In each other, they found solace and healing, their love growing stronger with each passing day. And though the memories of the war and the horrors they had witnessed would never fully fade, they knew that they had found something worth holding on to, each other.